Another day, another story. At G20 meet, China continues to oppose a joint document saying geopolitical issues should not be included in the statements, and South Africa introduces new concerns. Countries differ on phasing out versus phasing down of fossil fuels during energy transition discussion held in Goa. Indian G20 negotiators have made some progress on building a consensus during the latest ministerial meetings, as Russia has dropped its objections on one of the two paragraphs on the war in Ukraine that have been carried over from last year's Bali Declaration. While the two meetings that of G20 labor ministers held in Indore that ended on Friday and the G20 Energy Transition Ministerial in Goa on Saturday failed once again to issue joint communiques. The footnotes marking Russia's objections now only relates to one paragraph that is critical of Moscow's role in the Ukraine war. Russia accepted the second para, which deals more generally with the need to uphold international law. However, objections from China and now South Africa have raised new worries for the negotiators, according to the footnote in the chair's summary part of the document released in Goa. Russia expressed its distinct view on the situation in Ukraine, geopolitical tensions and sanctions during the meeting, in an indication that while Russia removed objections to one paragraph, the differences in position were debated openly during the ministerial. The paragraph Russia is now comfortable with includes Prime Minister Narendra Modi's statement that today's era is not of war. Beijing stand China, however, maintained its opposition to all geopolitical issues being included in the statements, indicating that the Ukraine war must not be mentioned. China stated that G20 is not the right platform to address security issues and opposed the inclusion of the geopolitical-related content. The footnotes in both the Labor Ministers' meet and the Energy Transition meet chair's summary read. Another new concern has emerged as South Africa asked to include a footnote on the Ukraine paragraphs in the Labour Ministers' meeting, indicating that the language over the war agreed to during the Bali summit may no longer be acceptable to all G20 members. South Africa's position is premised on the fact that Sherpas have not concluded discussions on paragraph on war in Ukraine. G20 Secretariat sources said that the changes in Russia's position are a positive step, and meant that there were still ways to negotiate a final communiqué that would be released during the Leaders Summit in Delhi on September 910. If India fails to issue a Leaders Declaration, as the joint communiqué is called, it would be the first time since the G20 grouping of global economies began in 1999, and was upgraded to the leader-level summit in 2008, that countries are unable to agree on a common document. Thus far, no G20 ministerial under India's presidency has been able to come up with a joint statement, given Russia and China's objections to the Bali paragraphs, while the G7 countries, including US, Europe and Japan, have insisted on the inclusion of the language critical of Russia. However, the sources said that it was heartening that there was consensus over large parts of the rest of India's G20 agenda on development issues. Meanwhile, the G20 Energy Transition Ministerial meeting in Goa ran into some trouble over issues such as the need to phase down, rather than phase out, fossil fuels, as well as over climate finance in the document. Energy issues. While India and other developing countries want to curb demands to phase out fossil fuels as they are still largely dependent on coal-based thermal power for development, more advanced economies have been pushing for quicker targets to end the construction of new coal-fired power plants and fossil fuel use. We did not fail to negotiate, said Minister of Power and Renewable Energy R.K. Singh, addressing a press conference in Goa on Saturday. If there's no unanimity, and even one country doesn't agree to the statement, then the document becomes the chair's summary, rather than a consensus document, he added, referring to issues over 7 paragraphs where there were objections from various countries.